Welcome to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
Today we're jumping into Maryland. And the sources you shared, they really highlight this idea of small state, but kind of a powerhouse, historically speaking, and even now.
Yeah, definitely. Packed with history and, well, a surprising amount of diversity packed into that smaller size. The past feels very present there.
Okay, so our goal here is basically to, quickly cover the big takeaways from these sources, key history, some cultural bits, maybe a few surprises.
Sounds good. It's a fascinating place sitting right at that crossroads. Historically, politically.
Yeah, dealing with some deep divisions historically, but, like the sources hint, leading in some really interesting ways today.
Right. So that history first. The sources point way back to 1632. Founded as a haven for English Catholics.
Which is pretty unique at the time, setting it apart from, say, Puritan New England.
Exactly. And its location.
Yeah.
And you just can't overstate it. Right there in the Chesapeake. So important during the Revolution.
But maybe even more defining was the Civil War. I mean, literally stuck between North and South. How did that play out?
Well, it created this incredibly complex identity. You had deep loyalties on both sides.
Right.
The sources bring up Harriet Tubman, born enslaved in Maryland, her work with the Underground Railroad, often going through Maryland. It just underscores the danger, the courage, the division right there.
Wow. Yeah, that really puts it in perspective. And speaking of defining moments tied to location, Fort McHenry, the sources mentioned that.
Oh, yeah, guarding Baltimore. War of 1812. That's where Francis Scott Key saw the flag still flying.
And wrote the poem that became the national anthem.
It's amazing how central Maryland feels sometimes.
It really is. Okay, so shifting gears a bit, what about Maryland today, geographically, where people live?
The sources say most folks are clustered centrally, around Baltimore and then down towards D.C. in those big metro areas.
Makes sense. And historically, that pattern has roots. The sources mention the fall line. Yeah, that geological feature where, like, the rivers get rocky. It affected where early settlements popped up because of water power and navigability.
Exactly. Though Annapolis, the capital, is kind of an exception right on the Severn River near the bay, always connected to the water.
Okay, so Annapolis. What other key spots do the sources highlight besides Fort McHenry?
Well, there's Baltimore's harbor area, Fells Point, the aquarium are mentioned, really historic spots.
And then across the Bay Bridge, right. The Eastern Shore sounds like quieter towns, lots of water.
Definitely a different feel over there. And for history buffs, Antietam National Battlefield is mentioned, a really sobering, important site from the Civil War.
The single bloodiest day in American history happened there. That's powerful.
It is. And we can't talk Maryland without mentioning blue crabs, right? The sources definitely bring those up. It's practically synonymous with the state.
Huh. You have to mention the crabs. Okay, so bringing it to the present day. Beyond history and geography, what's Maryland like now? Industries.
The sources point to strengths in biotech, aerospace, cybersecurity. A lot of that connects to the federal government presence nearby, research institutions, agencies.
Right, that proximity to D.C. is huge. But here's something that really jumped out at me from the sources, a specific ranking.
Ah, yeah, the gender equality one.
Yes, #1 in the U.S. for gender equality, according to U.S. News and World Report. That seems, well, surprising, given some of that complex history we talked about.
It is striking. The source says it's based on a pretty wide range of factors, things like education, the economy, health, representation, government, family planning, a whole mix.
Okay, so let's wrap this deep dive up. We've got Maryland, founded as a refuge, pivotal in the Revolution and Civil War, shaped by that north-south border.
Diverse geography, from Baltimore and D.C. suburbs to the Eastern Shore. Key sites like Fort McHenry, Antietam, blue crabs, of course.
And then this modern picture, strong in tech and science fields and, based on these sources, leading the nation in gender equality.
It really does feel like a mini America in some ways. You see all these big historical forces playing out, shaping the landscape, the culture, the present.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. How does a state like Maryland, with such a complicated past, literally a border state, a place of deep division but also incredible resilience and courage, like Tubman's story shows, how does it end up leading on something like gender equality today? What threads from its history or maybe its present circumstances as shown in these sources help explain that apparent contrast?